The procession came up the frontier road like a wound dressed in silk. We had drawn attention. You cannot mend a holy anchor with peasant hands and expect the center not to hear of it. They sent the past, dressed in silk. Word had traveled faster than I'd hoped, slower than I'd feared, and now the whole of Iron Ridge stood along the road's edge in the gray morning light. Smiths and charcoal carriers, and tannery women and children who'd never seen a court palanquin, watching the column wind up through the pine scrub and the soot-stained air. I heard someone near me say it aloud, as though naming the thing might make it smaller. The court has come to Iron Ridge. What does the capital want with us now? No one answered. We all knew the answer. Lord Inspector Ryu Gyeom stepped from the palanquin with a fan already raised against the smell of us. He was tall in the way that men who have never carried anything are tall, unhurried, unbent, and his robes were the deep blue of a court that had not yet admitted it was failing. He surveyed the gathered crowd the way you'd survey a collection of cracked vessels, looking for the one worth examining and dismissing the rest. His eye light, that faint luminous thread that the mandate's strongest carriers wore like a second iris, flickered once as he turned his gaze across the rooftops, and I filed that detail away before I'd consciously decided to. Lord Inspector Ryu Gyeom, one of the last strong threads of the mandate left alive. He looked at us the way you'd look at something on the bottom of your shoe. So this is the frontier, he said, and the fan moved in a slow, contemptuous arc. It smells of smoke and desperation. How fitting. Warden Cho Yeong stepped forward to receive him. She bowed, a correct bow, the precise angle the court required, not a hair's breadth more, and the rigidity of it told me everything. The warden had faced down raiders and a failing veil and a winter that killed cattle in their stalls. This bow cost her more than any blade ever had. Ryu Gyeom let the silence stretch before he spoke, because men like him understand that silence is also a demonstration of power. The court hears irregularities, he said at last, his voice carrying easily across the square. An anchor of the veil, touched and quieted by a hand with no thread in it. That sounds like heresy, or a lie. Cho Yeong straightened. It sounds like the truth, my lord. The anchor holds. The town lives. Names matter less than that, on the frontier. He smiled at her the way a man smiles when he has already decided the conversation is beneath him, and turned to address the crowd. What came next I had been half expecting. He called up the mandate, drew it visibly, the way court officials do when they want to remind a room of its proper order, and for a moment the air between his raised palm and the sky above us went luminous, a column of pale cold light that made the gathered townspeople flinch back and drop their eyes. It was real power. I won't pretend otherwise. Whatever the mandate was, whatever substrate of the world it drew from, it was not nothing, and the light it made was not a trick. But it guttered. Just once, just for a heartbeat, the column of light shivered and compressed, like a candle flame when a door opens somewhere in the house. His fingers tightened, the light steadied, he smiled wider, and the smile was practiced enough that most of the crowd probably missed what had preceded it. I didn't miss it. Behold what your betters were born holding, he said, and his voice had recovered all its steadiness. The power that keeps the dark at bay, not ironmongery. He let the light die and turned from the crowd as though the demonstration had gone exactly as intended. Then he found Seo-rin. I watched his gaze move across her face, the way a man's gaze moves when he recognizes something he wasn't expecting to find. A flicker of recalibration, quickly smoothed. She was standing at the edge of our group in her acolyte's gray, her ink-stained hands folded, her expression giving nothing away. But he knew the blood. Whatever the Yun line had lost in status, it had not yet lost the markers that a court-trained eye could read. Yun, he said, and his voice had shifted, softer now, almost solicitous, the register of a man offering something rather than taking it. Here, in the soot, with the smith and the rat child, your line held a thread once, faded now, but the blood remembers. Come back to the temple. This is no place for someone born to better. I glanced at Seo-rin. Her face was still, but I'd worked beside her long enough to read the stillness. She was not unmoved. Away back, everything she'd lost, the temple and the thread and the name that had once meant something in the capital, offered in a single sentence, with one hand extended and the other kept carefully out of sight. She didn't answer him. She didn't have to, not yet. The offer would sit in her like a splinter, and he knew it. He moved on to me. He circled me the way you circle a curiosity, not with any real weariness, but with the particular attention of a man who wants to understand what kind of small, harmless thing has caused him a large inconvenience. The famous outlander, he said, no thread, no name, no blood. Show me the trick you used on the anchor. I am curious what kind of charlatan fools an entire frontier. I told him the truth. It turned out to be the most dangerous thing I could have said. There was no trick, I said. A part was broken and I fixed it. The anchor isn't a god, it's a mechanism. Anyone could mend it, if they understood how it was made. The silence that followed was a different kind than the one he'd used on the Warden. This one was involuntary. He looked at me for a long moment, and something moved behind his eyes that wasn't contempt, or wasn't only contempt. Anyone, he repeated very quietly, you stand in the ashes and tell me the sacred is a machine, that anyone might wield it. He paused. Do you understand what you would unmake, if that were true? I understood exactly what I would unmake. That was rather the point. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned from me and walked into the workshop, and the rest of us followed because there was nothing else to do. He looked straight at the most important object in the kingdom and saw a dirty rock. The flat plate sat on the workbench where we'd left it. 3 stones worked against each other by the 3-plate method over the course of weeks, ground down by hand scraping and chalk and a 14-year-old's fingertips until the high spots were gone and the surface was what a surface was supposed to be. It was not beautiful in any way that Ryu Gyeom's education had prepared him to recognize. It was gray and heavy and slightly cold to the touch, and it looked like nothing. He nudged it aside with the edge of his slipper, the way you'd move a stone out of your path on a road. Peasants playing with stones and scratching sticks while their betters hold back the night, he said, scanning the rest of the workshop with the same dismissive sweep. What is this rubbish even meant to be? Cho Yeong was standing beside the bench. She'd been there when he walked in, and she hadn't moved. She was holding the straightedge, the one we'd made to check the plate's progress. A bar of iron that had taken its own long hours of filing and scraping to bring true. She looked at the plate, then at the inspector's back, and then she laid the straight edge across the surface. No light passed beneath it, not at any edge, not at any angle. The fit was complete. She didn't say anything aloud. She didn't have to. The thought was plain in her face. No light gets through. Not anywhere. We made it true. Seo-rin, standing beside her, looked from the plate to Ryu Gyeom and back again, and her expression was the quietest thing in the room. He is looking at the future, and he cannot even see it. He had turned back to face the Warden. Hear me, Warden. The softness was gone now. Unsanctioned works that ape the mandate are a hair's breadth from defiance of it. When I return, this heresy of iron will have stopped, or I will stop it. Cho Yeong met his eyes. We'll note the court's concern, my lord. He didn't understand what he'd seen, but men like him can always smell a thing that threatens them. He left us the way he'd arrived, with ceremony, with silk, with the crowd parting before the procession and closing behind it like water, and we stood in the workshop and listened to the sound of the palanquin bearers' feet on the road until there was nothing left to hear. The Warden was the first to speak. You've made an enemy of heaven itself, Smith, she said. She wasn't angry. She was doing what she always did, measuring the weight of a thing clearly so she could decide how to carry it. You understand that? Heaven's running out of fuel, Warden. I'd seen it in his hand, the same sputter she'd seen, the same involuntary tightening of the fingers. I watched it sputter in his hand, same as you did. We're not. Bet on the side that's still burning. She looked at me for a moment, then she nodded once and walked out into the afternoon. The palanquin was already half a li up the road when Ryu Gyeom let the mask go. Alone in the curtained dark, the bearer's rhythm steady beneath him, he reached for the mandate the way you reach for something you've carried your whole life without thinking, the reflex of a man who has never had to wonder whether his hand would find what he was reaching for. It barely answered. A thin thread of light, cold and reluctant, pulled in his palm and guttered there like the last coal in a dying brazier. He stared at it. The fan was folded in his other hand, and his knuckles had gone white around it. Come, he thought, or perhaps said. The curtains were drawn, there was no one to hear. Come, damn you. The light flickered. Why won't it come? That was the real reason the court feared us, not because our iron was heresy, because their light was going out, and ours was just being lit. That night the forge was the warmest place in Iron Ridge. The veil flickered at the edge of town, that pale dome of failing light that was the only thing standing between the frontier and whatever moved in the dark beyond it. But inside the workshop, the flat plate sat on the bench and caught the lamplight and gave it back steady and even the way a true surface does. Bakta was there, and Cho Yeong, and Seo-rin, and the warden had come back without explanation and stood near the door with her arms folded. We were all looking at the plate, and none of us had quite found the words for it yet. Let the court watch. We had a true surface now, the one thing every machine in history was ever built upon. Magic was dying out there in the dark. In here something new had just caught fire. Tomorrow we use this plate to build the next one, I said. Then ways, and a slide, and a spindle. Then we build the machine that builds the machines. Baek scratched the back of his neck. I have no idea what half those words mean, Smith. I looked at the plate. I looked at Young, who had laid a straight edge across 3 ground stones and found no light passing beneath it, and who understood, maybe better than any of us, what that meant. You will, I said. Everyone here will. That's the whole point.